And for more on this story, I'm joined by Matthew Torbitt, a former Labour advisor and political commentator. Thanks so much for being with us here on France 24. You know, the Prime Minister remains defiant to these growing calls for him to step down, but when does that position become untenable for him, or does it?
Some people would argue it's untenable now. I think the resignations that we've seen today, the ministerial resignation to allies of Wes Streeting, who is one of the main leadership candidates, are clearly purpose-led in the idea of trying to weaken number 10 Downing Street into coming out and saying, OK, I'll go now, this is enough. It appears from the advisors I've spoke to in 10 Downing Street that they're more than prepared to dig in and think they can see this through, certainly until the party conference in September.
We've seen some cabinet ministers resign. I think we're up to 4. If that happens en masse, could that be a tipping point?
I think once you start having people, secretaries of state resigning, there's rumours Shabana Mahmood, as you spoke about in your report, maybe somebody who's on resignation watch tonight. Wes Streeting, who I mentioned earlier, is reported to be holding talks with the Prime Minister tomorrow and is supposedly asking him how's he going to get out of this mess. Some people may point out the irony that the mess is partly being caused by allies of Wes Streeting who are resigning en masse at the moment. But if one goes and then another goes, there may be a tipping point for the Prime Minister this week. But he may be saved tomorrow by the King's speech.
What we've seen outplay today really underscores how much harder it is for Britain to get rid of a Labour Prime Minister than a Conservative one. Why is that?
It's just not something we do. We don't tend to do that sort of thing. And I think what I would push back on is I think the Conservatives tend to change leaders to save their party. I think the argument I've been trying to make is that Keir Starmer needs to go to save the country. I think if Keir Starmer currently stays, you're looking, I mean, for me, I think you need to have a Joe Biden-like conversation that should have happened a lot earlier in his term, in that you are not going to win the general election. All the polls, everything is against you. You're not going to be able to turn this around. Your premiership is essentially toxic. Do the selfless thing, hand over to somebody else now, preferably Andy Burnham would be my choice, or you're going to hand the keys over to number 10 to Nigel Farage.
Yeah, so is that what you're saying? That's ultimately what will happen here to the Labour Party if Starmer stays on as Prime Minister?
Yeah, Reform UK, the right-wing party that Nigel Farage leads, has led the last 300 opinion polls. They're surging on a populist narrative that they're going, similar to Donald Trump, they'll smash up the system. They don't want to talk about the real tough decisions that government does take. And ultimately, I cannot see any other outcome than Nigel Farage ending up as Prime Minister over the next few years, unless Keir Starmer goes. And the only Labour politician who is regularly in a net favourability place is Andy Burnham, the Mayor of Greater Manchester. There's calls for him to come back. Angela Rayner, the former Deputy Prime Minister, is another. She's under pressure because she didn't pay some tax on a house that she should have done and is under investigation by the authorities. So Andy Burnham is the clear front runner for me. That's who I've been backing. But Wes Streeting, I'm sure, will have his say with the Prime Minister tomorrow.
Isn't there a snag, though, with Andy Burnham, the Mayor of Greater Manchester, in that he's not an MP? How could he then replace Starmer, and how long might that take?
So constitutionally, you don't have to be an MP, but the Labour rule book, the Labour Party rule book, says you do have to be an MP to be the leader of the Labour Party. So that's the bind he has himself in at the moment. Andy Burnham has been in the capital, in London today. My understanding from Team Burnham is that he's met with an MP who is willing to stand down and retire from their seat to allow him a clear run at going for it. The other hurdle Andy Burnham will face is the Labour Party's National Executive Committee. What they say is the rule book says if you hold a mayoral position, you've got to seek special position from the National Executive Committee to run to be a candidate in a seat for Parliament. So there's many hurdles for him to reach. He appears to have hit one this afternoon, although we'll wait to hear more on that. And he's hoping he's got a majority on the National Executive Committee. That then makes things a little bit easier for him.
What about the case that Keir Starmer is making for staying on in his position? Do you think that it would usher in chaos, if he steps down as he suggests?
I think you could make that argument. I hear Keir Starmer's argument that, he won a landslide majority 2 years ago. The problem with that majority is it was quite wide but not very deep. He received less votes than Jeremy Corbyn when he was opposition leader in 2017 and 2019. There's 3 million less votes. So that it was a bit of a loveless landslide. When I was out knocking on doors at the time, working for the party, it was more, we don't like the Conservatives anymore, so we'll give you a go. It wasn't, we really want you. And I think it's to also suggest that there isn't current economic chaos in the United Kingdom at the moment. And a large part of that, if I'm to be really fair to Keir Starmer, is he's given a lot of the Labour MPs what they wanted. The Labour MPs have to look at themselves a little bit and realise that tough decisions have to be made in government. You can't just give handouts to people constantly because you're worried about the next general election. Ultimately, the economic situation won't allow for that.
You mentioned a couple of possible candidates who could replace Starmer. How difficult will it be for the Labour Party to coalesce around any one person?
There definitely won't be one person. The Labour Party is a deeply factional beast. You have the sort of left of the party, the Socialist Campaign Group. You have what's known as the soft left, centre left. That's the Tribune group of MPs. You then have the centre right, known as the Blairites, after Tony Blair, which is where Streeting would fall into. And what you'll have is a sort of Blairite candidate up against somebody from the soft left. Angela Rayner, some people would argue, the former Deputy Prime Minister, is a little bit tarnished because of financial irregularities that she's trying to clear her name on. There's been talk of Ed Miliband, who was famously Labour leader from 2010 to 2015 and had already lost an election back then. Andy Burnham is another possibility that I think lots of people want to coalesce around. But there will likely be a candidate from the left and a candidate from the right of the Labour Party. And because the membership of the party is currently in quite a left-wing place, it would likely be the soft left candidate that would triumph.
How do you think the British public feels about all this, watching this sort of chaos today? Isn't Keir Starmer widely unpopular already?
He is unpopular. What we found, though, on certain media outlets is there's a deal of sympathy for him. I think some people are sort of recognising that it was a tough job to take on after 14 years of Conservative rule, many years of austerity and cuts. Obviously, the economic impact Brexit had, and then COVID as well, and how unprepared the UK government was at the time. And I think there's a little bit of sympathy. But at the same time, that's what my sympathies lie with the British public. 9.7 million of them voted in 2024 for change. That's what the Labour Party offered. It was a one-word slogan. They said, we're going to offer change. It was about hope. It was about positivity. And I think people expected something a little bit different. I think if you'd have been in a coma for the last 2 years, you wouldn't have noticed the difference if you'd woke up today, such as the managed decline of the current UK economy and sort of crime and other things that affect government. It feels very, you could get a fag paper in between both Rishi Sunak and Keir Starmer's premierships at the moment.
We'll have to leave it there. Matthew Torbitt, former Labour advisor and political commentator, thanks so much for joining us here on France 24.
Thank you.